Welcome back, guys, to the recap of round number 2 of my match against the Czech number 1 Grandmaster David Navara. Today I had the black pieces, obviously, because yesterday I had white. We're always changing the colors. And fortunately, it was not as long of a game as it was yesterday. In case you haven't checked out yesterday's game recap, make sure to do so. You can find it on my channel. I saved a pretty difficult draw. I saved a draw from a very difficult position, thankfully, and had to defend basically since the middle game until the end game, and it was very, very exhausting. And today, the game did not last as long without spoilering anything else. Before we get into it, of course, no engine analysis today as well. All of my thoughts here are just what I thought during the game, and also what I'm thinking now if I look at the position. But you feel free to correct me if I missed anything. I'm always very appreciative for you guys to point out some mistakes I'm making in my analysis as well. This obviously happens if I don't have the engine turned on, especially in yesterday's endgame. I think it happened on quite a few occasions that I just missed some fairly obvious things in hindsight. Yeah, let's start with that. Let's start with the game. D4 was not like 100% it. He will do. David, as any top player in the world, can play any opening. So I had no idea what he would choose. It is also completely unclear to me, honestly, in the next game, if he will stick to D4 or if he will switch, because usually I think he has most games with E4, but he can play any single move, obviously. I played the classical Queen's Gambit. I do have quite a lot of games in the Nimzo, so at least for this game, I thought it would be nice to do that, because I'm quite sure that he would just prepare for something in the Nimzo in general. So I went for the classical cowspot, c takes d5, e takes d5, bishop g5, c6, and after e3, the line with bishop f5. Which doesn't have, I would say, the most exciting reputation, because white has a chance to get a slightly more pleasant endgame with either queen f3 or queen b3. David chose the move queen f3 in the game, which is the main move. In general, bishop f5 is, positionally speaking, it's a very desirable move. If white would make some very slow move, like knight f3, for example, now, then black would be very happy, because I was able to activate the bishop here, and this bishop trade is very much in black's favor. A cowspot position like this is what black is really hoping for. But of course, white has some ways to make use of that. As I said, queen f3 or queen b3 should be the critical moves. Point of queen b3 is that b7 is not protected. Black should go queen b6, and now something similar to the game can happen, where I also get the doubled pawns here. I played this line. I think I had 2 games. I have 2 games in the database. One against Radek Wojtaszek. Against me, he played the move bishop d3. That was in the Czech league. And then Radek just went for this cowspot, which is also very much playable for white. But in general, black is quite happy to have this bishop exchanged. But white still can play this position, of course. So David went for this, bishop g6, take everything. And here there are still many games. Probably the most famous one was one novelty which Magnus got on the board against Vladimir Kramnik. I think it was around 2017, 2016, which went knight f3. David went for h4 against me. Magnus played knight f3, and I think that Kramnik went for how was it exactly? The old line went something like this: knight h4, and then some bishop e7. Or did they do it like this? Knight h4, f5. There is some line like this, but somehow I think they start with knight d7, and Magnus at some point went for this move knight e2. It could be here immediately, or it could be somewhere here. That's not how it goes. Bishop e7, sorry, knight d7, knight h4, bishop e7. It could be here that this move was what Magnus played. Also here there have been some theoretical developments. But in general, what black really needs to avoid in this position is that white gets knight g3, knight f5, or also what is often a positional threat is f4, f5. I've seen a couple of, like, there are some games, let me just put up some position randomly on the board. If I allow something like this, then black will just be down a whole piece for basically the whole game. unless I get some tactics in to activate the bishop, but this is what black really wants to avoid. So usually after f4, black has the reaction of bishop e4 in most cases, but those are the two or some of the main ideas for white. I think the theory developed something like this now. And actually David had a game here, I believe, which he also analyzed in his recent book, Lessons on Uncompromising Chess, which I also studied. I went through the whole book before my match, and he did have a pretty nice win in this line. I think this is still playable for black, but white of course has some chances. Without revealing anything here just yet, what would be my intention in this line. But David went for the move h4, which is I would say next to knight f3 the other big continuation. I don't think that David ever had any games with h4. I think he usually went for the move knight f3. I play h5. Pawn on h5, of course, can be a weakness, but on the other hand, white does not have knight h4 anymore. This was still my preparation. King d2, I probably have analyzed it, but I didn't fully recall the theory here, if there is any theory. It seemed to me like David is still prepared here with the move king d2. There was a recent game in the candidates tournament, Giri against Matthias Blöbaum, where Giri, I think, went for some setup with g3, bishop g2, and knight ge2. What I should have also mentioned in the beginning, I mean, the whole line, of course, looks extremely ugly for black. And white is generally a little bit better in most positions. It's hard for black to make any progress, but black is also extremely solid. And if black understands the right plans and knows how to handle the position, then I think it's incredibly hard for white to break through. But of course, I mean, that doesn't even need to be mentioned. If you want to play for win, then if you really are in like a must-win situation, then the line is probably not the best choice. Yeah, I played h5. It's not the only move. Black can also allow h5. Not to go into that much detail here, but I really like this approach. King d2, knight d7. And he offered the bishop exchange, which I accepted. And now I think the move rook g8 is, at least positionally speaking, it's an important decision to make. Because I really want to provoke him to play g3. Because let's say if I start with f5, he always has this idea of rook h3, rook f3. Maybe I still have to move rook g8 now. But yeah, probably this is still working. But in general, I really want to provoke g3, just that he doesn't have this idea anymore. And also another idea can sometimes be knight e2, knight g3, hitting both of those pawns. So that's why I think the advance of g3, positionally speaking, is very much in black's favor. So g3, f5. As I said, I was not really in any preparation here anymore, but I knew that this sort of position, especially if I successfully provoke g3, should not be anything special for white. And I think that assessment should be correct. Here David started thinking and he went for the move knight h3. Knight f6, knight d2, which I think it could be setting up a small positional trap, which is that white could be thinking of going b4 next. And that's also why I went for a5, which I think is a good move. Bishop d6 could allow b4. I'm not 100% sure about it. But if I take, then white has rook b1. And if a5, a3. And now white would probably be just clearly better unless I'm missing something concrete. I was briefly thinking about a5 here. I don't think that white can sacrifice the pawn. I'll just consolidate with b4 next. But I thought white can simply go a3 and then maybe rook b1 next. Still, if I take here, okay, and take once again. I didn't even see in the game that the rook on g8 is protected. I thought rook a8 is winning. But again, he can probably go rook b1 and then take on b7 next, which looks pretty unpleasant for black. It looks really bad here. To be fair, I can still make some normal move like king e7 or something when white's advantage is probably still not anything that substantial, but I think this would be quite a big success for white to get the move b4 in. So that's why I started with a5. He played this knight to f4, bishop d6, king e2. And I thought his idea of king e2 is actually to play with king f3. I went king e7. But he did not go for the plan with king f3. He went rook c1 first, rook h8. It looks like a strange move, but I'm just preparing, protecting this pawn and getting ready to activate my knight on e4. And in general, I did not really, like, I think the important thing to realize in a position like this is that black should not rush to do anything. It's really hard for white to improve the position, but it is also so for black. It would look nice for black to start pushing here, a4, rook a5, rook b5. I was also thinking about that in the game, and it might be perfectly playable. But if I go a4, at least maybe he can think about going b4 sometimes. I didn't think about it here specifically. I can probably still take and go rook a2. Again, if I take here, then I think white is quite happy with rook b1. But it will be easier for him to play b3 to get b4 at some point, I thought, which it is not if my pawn is still on a5. That was the whole idea. So I didn't really want to touch anything on the queen side unless I really have to. By the way, one thing which I would like to mention here, I'm not sure if this is an idea here, but I also consider that he might think about going b3, a3, and then try to play b4 sooner or later. And I think one idea which doesn't hurt to keep in mind, I saw that the engine gave this in some position. It's probably nothing compared to this one, but I thought this was a cool idea to show bishop a3, which is just hindering white from playing a3, and it's going to be quite difficult, if not impossible, to get rid of the bishop. But okay, even if white gets a3, I mean, I can probably just stay like this and even double on the a file, and I don't really see how white can make any significant progress. And whenever white goes a3, then I'm usually quite happy to play a4 just to fix his queen side. Okay, he went for this, king e7, rook c1, and I played rook h8. And I thought that he played the move rook g1, which was a bit mysterious to me. I thought that he would go king f3, with the idea maybe to go knight d3, knight e5, and then king f4, but it should not work in general. I would have probably went knight e4. And after knight d3, okay, just to make a point, I could even do something like this and just go back. Maybe white can try rook c2 here and then to prepare king f3. But even if he gets all of this, let's just make some random waiting move. King f3, rook a8. Like, I don't think he's getting king f4 anyway, because after king f4, I will just have f6. So I don't think any of this should be working, but it was something I was thinking about during the game, because obviously the pawn on f5 is a weakness, but I don't think that white can really go after it. So to be clear, I think the position is objectively just a draw, even though those positions, like often I remember the engine was often giving a slight advantage for white at all times, but I was checking those endgames and entering the moves and trying to play against the engine, and at some point it just went to complete equality in many of those positions. And this is one of the setups which I think should be holding quite easily for black. He went rook g1. Anyway, white can just make some slow moves like this. I went knight e4, which invites white to play f3, but I was quite happy that he goes for it, because f3 is another move which I think is nice for me if white plays it, because now the pawn on g3 is not protected, so is the pawn on e3. And on top of that, white will not have this plan of king f3, king f4, which anyway should not really work, but I don't have to worry about it anymore. Now he played knight d3, and I think that was probably a good idea, knight d7. Now I thought that my knight has kind of done the job on f6. Anyway, it cannot go to e4 or g4 anymore, and now my idea was to put the knight to e6, completely fighting over the control over the f4 square. Of course, with knight d7, I'm leaving the control over the h5 point, but by bringing the knight to e6, whenever white goes knight f4, similar to what happened in the game, I can just exchange everything, which should lead to a drawish rook endgame. I was also, like, knight d7 was not my first idea. My first idea was just to go for a move like rook g8, and then after knight f4, just to do something, like some random waiting move, and I still, like, I don't fully see what white wants to do, but he can try to ask some questions like this, and maybe at some point knight c5, and king f2 just to protect here. But I think this should also be okay for black. But I'm quite happy with what I played, knight d7. He played knight f4 and knight f8. And here he went for the move knight c5, which, and now finally I exchanged my pretty important bishop. I think usually you don't really want to give up the bishop. I mean, maybe here you could also think about it again with a concrete plan to get the knight around here. And probably also here it's nice that the king cannot go to f3. I think that all of this should also be pretty okay for black. But I didn't take here, I think, because now he could actually take with the g-pawn, and then I think I'm maybe not in time to consolidate as I was in the game because there were still knights on the board. Anyway, I went knight to f8, which I think is a good move, knight c5. If he doesn't go for that, let's say he goes for king f2, I would just go knight e6. And at some point, I'm again ready to just take on f4, probably with the bishop. And yeah, I don't see what white can really do here. Maybe he can keep the knights on the board, but what does he do after that? I mean, g3 is well protected, but maybe now is the time that I just push a4. Even though I don't have to, I can maybe also just wait. Let's say rook a6. And again, I think it's going to be quite difficult for white to progress on the queen side. Also, the breaks with e4 and g4 are only making things better for me because I can finally get rid of my doubled pawn. So I think this position is completely okay for me. E1 knight c5, I can probably also do the same here, just wait with rook a7, but I think this now was just working quite well for me. I took on c5 and played knight e6, which immediately allows me a transition into a rook endgame. If he takes with the pawn, I would also go knight e6, and now the pawn on c5 could even be a target sometimes. Like, for example, if knight d3, I would have gone a4, and then I have ideas like this, and I don't think that black should be worse here. If I get all of those moves in, okay, black can probably also not be better, but there are some games where white is over pushing those endgames. I've seen quite a lot of them. So he took with rook, and I played knight e6. He went all the way back to c1. And here I was thinking for quite a bit if I should go to this endgame or not. In the end, I decided to do so, just not giving him the chance to keep the knights on the board. However, I needed to be a bit precise here with the calculation. I think that this move is probably fairly important, because if white gets rook g5 in, then it could be... or rook g7, probably the computer doesn't care anyway. Even if the rook gets to g7 and white doubles, like let's just say something like this, yeah. Even if I do something like this, I can easily guess that the computer just says it's absolutely nothing, which is possible, yeah. It's not easy for white to make any progress. But I thought the way which I chose was kind of the most concrete, because if he goes rook g5 now, which he didn't do, then I think I can go f6. Rook takes f5, let's say check, king d3, and I mostly relied on my intuition here that the rook on f5 is simply not easily getting out anymore. I could go king e6, I think I also have other options, but just this position, I cannot move my rook here because then he could take on h5. And if I leave the g file, then he could also get rook g1, rook g6. But it just looks really dubious for white. I mean, I was calculating something like this, which I thought should also not be worse for me, and I think I could start giving checks here, or rook f8. I thought this should be okay, but it gets a bit complicated. But just to make a point, I think I was looking at something like this. And then if the king leaves, I can probably take here. And otherwise, maybe I can give checks, even though now the king is probably leaving. But okay, I also have the a-pawn, which could actually be quite fast. And I think that I generally have quite a few ways here. I mean, it just looks a little bit wrong for white with the rook on f5. I don't know what is the absolute best here for black, but I don't think that white should be going for this. It just looks fairly risky. And okay, in the worst case, like if I would have had some big issues there, then I could still probably go for this, and then if rook here, then go back and then play this. Which during the game, actually, this looked way more unpleasant than it is now when I look at it, because I don't see any way for white to do anything, even in this position. Just going back to this moment, I was thinking about this because it also looked kind of attractive just to play a move like king d6. This was the other move I was thinking about. because whenever white takes on e6, then I'm very happy. My pawn structure is completely fine. Even this, I think, is not a problem at all. But yeah, he probably shouldn't take. And I don't think that something like this offers any big prospects for white as well. But I just, I thought if I can go into the rook endgame, why not just do it before he plays this on for forever. If the rook endgame is fine, I can go for it. And that's why I decided to do that. Yeah, he played king d3. I think that, just to mention, all of the pawn endgames are drawn, like, for example, this. Maybe now that the king is so far away, I can even start thinking about something with c5, but usually this is just a draw. Like if we imagine the king on d3, I can just stay or even play b5, and white cannot break through. He went king d3, f6, and now he took on g8 after quite a long think, and then went rook c5. I was thinking about e4 here, and obviously I still didn't analyze this, but I thought this could be a critical move. But it's also not like white is playing without any risk now, because I am getting quite a few squares. I thought I had a couple of options here. I don't think that I wanted to take twice, even though that should probably also be fine. But I was seeing some stuff like this, and then maybe the rook could come into g6. But okay, I can probably play king f7. What I was thinking about was something like rook g4. I think here this was maybe my favorite solution. And if he takes, I can take back. If he takes on g4, then my pawn should become pretty strong. And if here I was calculating rook c7 and rook e1. If rook c7, I have king d6, rook c1, and probably I have quite a few options here. But at the very least, I can start giving checks. And I don't think that I can be worse here by any means. King cannot go to the c file because the rook is hanging. And yeah, I can just, okay, here I could probably pick up the pawn on b2. I could bring in my other rook with check. So I think here it's already risky for white. If rook e1, what was I thinking about? I thought this was precise. f5, and also here I can give a check. Even though it's a question if rook e6 is actually so dangerous, but I didn't want to allow it. Well, I mean, to be fair, also something like this is probably a draw. Take here, rook g4 coming next. I don't see black risking anything here. But what I was thinking about was to give a check. Now again, if the king leaves, then I can trade one pair of rooks. And here the same story. And if here, then I thought I have another check. And if king d3, white maybe needs to watch out for some ideas like this. So those were some of my thoughts in this line. But I thought that I have to be fine here, obviously, and that I should have quite a few options to continue playing this. But this was my main continuation, which I probably would have gone for in the end. Okay, so he decided to trade, which was kind of a pleasant surprise. I mean, anyway, nothing much is changing, but I thought he might try something like this. And I was thinking if I should go king f7 and then trade everything, but I would probably have just gone for king d6. And if he goes for a3, b4, I would probably just wait, maybe king e6. And whenever he goes b4, I can probably also take and then go with my rook to the a file and start giving checks, which also should not be anything special for white. So he took and rook c5. Now I played the move rook g2. I also thought that this would be possible, and was even thinking that if white is not careful, it could go wrong. But okay, he can probably just go back, and then again we can probably repeat the moves here. Just to make one point here, like if just randomly white waits, and if I get this, then okay, here it already looks very dangerous for white. So this was my whole idea here, to play king d6 and b6, and then I could even play c5 later on. But okay, I mean, Rook 8, it just looks a bit passive. White could also play E4. And yeah, I was thinking about this, but I thought it was just unnecessary because Rook G2 just looks like the human move, just playing for activity and not passively with Rook 8. So he took, I took on B2, and here we went for the move repetition and decided to make a draw. David, after the game, mentioned to me that after E4, he was thinking about this. I was too. He was saying that even this already starts to look a little bit risky for White, which I agree, because all of the pawns are now a bit weak, and if Rook H2 is coming, I threaten to give a check, threaten to take this. So probably White is still completely okay here, but it just seems unnecessary. I could also take here. I also thought that this cannot be any issue for me. Just should be a draw. Actually, this was what I was thinking about, to give a check first and then here. Probably doesn't matter whatsoever, but this was what I was thinking about, and obviously there was also this option. Anyway, this was how the game ended. So I'm pretty happy with how the game went. I think it was very solid and decently played from my part, also from David's side, of course, even though he will probably not be as satisfied as I am, considering I had the black pieces and he's a high-rated opponent, high-rated player. But anyway, that was it for today. If you enjoyed the recap, let me know and leave a comment. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the recap of round number 3 of my match against David Navara. Hopefully, I'll be able to put some pressure with the white pieces. See you soon, guys.